Hi, welcome. I'm Lisa Natoli, and I'm so excited to be here with Byron Katie.
Hello.
And we're here in Boston, and she's on a book tour for her newly published book, A Mind at Home with Itself. And I'm just thrilled and blessed to be able to sit with you and talk about this book. And her husband, Stephen Mitchell, is here. Why don't you come in? And you, Stephen, are really the one, I think, who is responsible for this book coming out, because you are the one that got all the stories out of Katie, and you're the one that put them all into this book. So I want to thank you with all my heart for what you've done.
You're so welcome. My profound pleasure.
Mm-hmm. What's it been like?
What's it been like to write it?
Mm-hmm.
Stephen translated, and you can say a little about how
Okay. Well,
about your Diamond Sutra. Yeah.
Yeah. People had been asking us for years, or saying, when's the next Katie book coming? We want the next Katie book, etc. So when I finished a long project of my own, I started to wonder about what the focus of the new book could be, and then it occurred to me that the Diamond Sutra would be the perfect structure for it. The Diamond Sutra, for those of you who haven't heard of it, most people haven't, is a Buddhist text that was written 800 years after the historical Buddha died, and it's a text about generosity. And the central point of the Diamond Sutra is that the more you realize that there's no such thing as a self, that it's just a concept, that in reality there's no separation between self and other, the more naturally you become a generous human being. That's the central insight. And so I created a version that I thought was accessible to the general reader these days, and it was let that dazzling clarity through. And I read a chapter every day to Katie and wrote down her reactions and asked questions and pointed her this way and that way, and eventually that became A Mind at Home with Itself.
I absolutely love it, and I personally feel it's your best work yet. And just based on what you said, I wanted to read this first sentence or paragraph on generosity, because it's my favorite, generosity all the time. It says, "A Mind at Home with Itself is a book about generosity. How can we be generous not just occasionally, but all the time, every day of our lives? It sounds like an unattainable ideal, but what if it's not? What if generosity can become as natural as breathing? This book shows you how." And I have a book club, and it's been going on for many years. And about a year ago, somebody asked me if we could do 1,000 Names for Joy next. And I love that book, and that's how I came to know about you. Somebody
Love that book.
I love that book. And I remember the day exactly because it was given to us as a wedding gift on October 20th, 2013. And so we were going to do that book next. I had another book lined up, and I didn't know that you had another book on the way. And so there's 900 people in this group right now, and it's the whole month of October. We are reading A Mind at Home with Itself. It's free, it's online. For anyone who's watching this, you can join. I've added an additional Monday. It's Monday nights at 7 to 8:30. And we're using you as our guide. And what I love about the book study groups is we choose books that are inspiring, usually spiritual, life-changing. And I want people to have a direct experience. So I'm also inviting people to do the work, to go to your website.
Oh, good.
All the information's free there, downloadable. And so you can go to lisanatoli.com/bookstudy to be on the mailing list to sign up for that. And what I just wanted to say for the both of you is what people are loving right now is your Audible version, because the two of you are the ones that are reading the book. And so
It was fun.
yeah. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
So I'll just retire now. Bye. If you call me later, I'll be on hand.
No, when you point out generosity, and I put it together with Stephen just saying a few words about no self, and that, to me, I translate that as selflessness, and we've been using that term forever. Be selfless, and so selflessness is really all about no self. So it's a fearless state of mind, but when there's no self, you have to be generous because there's no self that needs or wants. So it's not that we don't appreciate and we're not grateful. It's a state of, again, it's a fearless state. And in what little time we've had to talk together, I can see when you just said you were going to give your life to giving, and everything just went away, basically. That's what it left no self. And just two experiences sitting here. It's for all of us. And fear is a terrible way to live, and fear, the good news is fear is nothing more than we attach to the judgments and assumptions we're believing. And other than that, we're selfless.
Exactly.
Generous.
Yeah. So I just wanted to just say a few things. So in the book study group, we have 50-50. 50% are totally in love with you and are committed to the work, and they use these worksheets on a regular basis. And the work is a way to identify any thought that is causing you suffering, and you don't let it slip by your awareness. And
it's a way to identify and question the thoughts that cause all the suffering in your world.
And the other 50% have never heard of you before. So it's exciting for me because now we have a group of people who are beginning to really see that it's their thoughts that are causing the suffering.
And the other half to kind of support them to go through it. So we have this wonderful balance of when we need a little help, there we are.
Exactly. So what I wanted to really hear as we begin is you had a very dramatic awakening. So your awakening was in 1986. You were suicidal, agoraphobic, you had no spiritual background, you had no interest in awakening or enlightenment.
Well, no idea of it. And I didn't, with no religious background, or I had no inclination of there was a way out other than death of the body. So I was just looking forward to death of the body in that suicidal state of mind for so many years. But the thought that held me back probably was, I don't want my children to blame themselves. And but I couldn't say exactly what it was. I just didn't do it. And so one particular morning, as I lay sleeping on the floor, because I was so full of self-loathing, I didn't believe I deserved a bed to sleep in. And this particular morning, a cockroach crawled over my foot. I opened my eyes and all the pain was gone. All the suffering was gone. It was gone. And it was, in place of the darkness, was a joy that is, I wouldn't describe it. We all have our own idea of what joy means, by definition. But for me, it's the absence of suffering, and then I saw in that moment how the world was created, how my world was created. When I believed my thoughts, I suffered. It created the entire world. And then I began to laugh, and that was the first thing, as I would say then, the first thing out of its mouth was just laughter, and it was like born out of laughter, this consciousness, and then it just, this body I referred to for 2 or 3 years as it. And it stood, it walked to a mirror.
Well, in that moment, it's described that you literally had no memory of your husband, your children.
No.
You didn't know of, they told you your name was Byron Katie.
Yeah.
And you felt, because you were associating with, I don't know what you would call it, the awareness or light or whatever that was. Like in the book, the way you described it is when the cockroach crawled on your leg, you had a thought of what was happening before the awareness of the cockroach. Yeah. And you became identified with the awareness. And you described it like when you're sleeping, you don't have an awareness of cockroach crawling overfoot or problems that you have here. And so something happened in that moment where you fully became the awareness and not the experience.
Well, that's what lived. It was that awareness, that unidentified awareness. And it felt more like a rhythm, if anything. And it just kept expanding and expanding and expanding. And then then there was a window, and then I could see the sky and the clouds, and that's when I began to laugh, because I can say I know. I began to laugh because I saw, to name anything and believe it is to attach to it, but I had no attachment mechanism. So I got the joke, and only that's in hindsight. But not a lot of words for this. I don't want to confuse anyone. It's what the important thing that came out of the experience is that when I believe my thought, I suffer. When I don't believe my thoughts, I don't suffer. And I've come to see that this is true for every human being. And these 4 questions and turnarounds that I call the work came out of that experience, and out of that direct experience. So, it's I looked out the window, I could see the sky and the clouds, so those are clouds. Is it true? Brought me right back to that laughter. And to notice how I react when I believe the thought, the whole world came into focus because it was named. And it was falsely named, false self, falsely named.
Yeah.
And then who would I be without the thought? That 4th question. And then that original experience that never moves, always present, can never be overridden, even though we can lose awareness of it, I guess is the way to say it. But it doesn't move in any of us. It's we can override it through attachment to what we're thinking and believing, but we're innocent there. We don't do it on purpose, but inquiry breaks the spell. It's like we're in a hypnotic trance, and inquiry wakes us up to reality.
And what I liked is, so you had a very spontaneous awakening, and very few people have that. I loved how Stephen said in his experience he only knows of one other person, Ramana Maharishi. But what I like about your story, and what I love about the stories in this book, I thank you, Stephen, so much for putting everything you put in here, is that even though you had an awakening that brought you laughter and brought you joy, that was when the work in you began. And so you still had, it's described as 2 or 3 years in a desert.
Yeah, just undoing the false creation. I like to say I haven't met a thought that I haven't loved. And so it all had to be loved. It just couldn't be left out, because the world is what we believe it to be, so there is nothing else to love. If we don't love our thoughts, we can't love what we see as the apparent world.
Yeah. And so many people, so I'm a teacher of A Course in Miracles, there's a lot of people who are on a spiritual path, and the one thing I hear the most, I'm not there yet. And what I love about you as a role model and as a teacher is how you're direct experiences are so authentic. So you, in all of these stories, you have had things happen to you. So I hear people say, I'm not there yet because I have cancer, because I have no money, because I have relationships that are still conflictual, I'm confused, I'm sad, I'm this, I'm that. And your stories, so you had this awakening, you went blind, you fell downstairs, Stephen had to put makeup on you, you had a gun put to you and threatened to be killed. You, just a few years ago, you had a health situation that put you in the hospital where they made you sign the papers of that you might die.
Resuscitation.
And through it all, there you were, in the wonder and the curiosity and the joy of it. And nowhere in there do I imagine you ever thinking, I'm not there yet.
Oh, no. What was the makeup thing where you had to put makeup on?
He said in one of your, I think it was in 1,000 Names of Joy, that you couldn't see to put your makeup on, and you couldn't see, you would put the wrong sweater on, you would put the wrong clothes on backwards.
Yeah.
And Stephen would meet, you would have to get help.
Like I might, it was my daughter. I might wear a red sock and a green sock, and she would say, "Mom, no, socks match here. You know, we have to, in this world, you know, we don't wear our pajamas to the grocery store." And it's relearning everything, and in the background, this kind of remembering comes into focus. It's like remembering an ancient world, the old world of where people suffered, and the old paradigm.
That reminds me. So one of my favorite stories in the book, you guys are going to love this one, is talking about the ancient world. I'd love for you to talk about My Lady and what happened with this woman that showed up near your bed because you didn't believe in a Jesus or a Buddha or didn't know about them. So a woman showed up by your bed.
Not having any religion, I guess what I equated love with was an overweight grandmother type, because I was lying in bed and I looked over, and she was sitting in the chair and next to my bed, and you know, I really love that people read the experience in the book. It was so profound, but the short version is she, at one point, I was no longer on the bed, I was the woman, looking on to the woman on the bed, and the man lying next to her. And the experience was looking at an ancient world, even like pre-dinosaur, where people hurt each other and they didn't understand who and what they were, and it was incomprehensible. But the compassion and the love I felt just looking over at those two, I couldn't even call them beings. They were like animals, like cavemen, even though it looks modern to us. And then the compassion, and the understanding, but anyway, at some point I felt myself back as the woman on the bed, and I looked over and she was gone. And I didn't understand how I was ever going to be able to take a deep breath again. There was such longing for her. And then eventually, as I got up and around, and I imagined for the day, but anytime I would exaggerate or not tell the truth or think or do hurtful anythings, I would begin to feel, I'd begin to see her presence across the room, and I learned immediately that it was the absence of her that's where the longing was. So I had merged with this loving source as I had projected her originally to be, that was really teaching me to oh my goodness, to be.
And the way you described it in the book is, so there was that first initial experience where you woke up in the bed and there was this woman dressed in a funny dress and funny shoes and overweight, and she's just sitting there with so much love, you just could feel, and then you entered into her, looking
I just found
back.
myself in her, looking over at not where I had been, but looking over at these two ancient strangers.
Yep, and then the
with
way
no
you described
association.
it was that when you ever, from that moment on, you lied, you were doing something self-serving, that you would see her and you would know that you had to correct it with the person,
Immediately, yes.
or she would disappear. And what you wanted more than anything was that presence and that love.
Yes, I couldn't live without it. So I had to do whatever it took, and it had to be authentic,
Yep.
or there was no presence.
And you said if you lied, you had to go, even if it didn't seem like a lie in your mind, if you
Admit it, make
recognized.
it right, start over, no matter what, even if it was to the death, no matter what.
And to me, that's uncompromising. Like, I love that, because
it was
now,
uncompromising.
how often we are just little tiny little lies in our minds. But we do lose our center now. We lose that presence. And what you said eventually happened was that there was that merging.
Yeah, there was a merging, and so I ceased to experience her absence.
I love that.
Such a gift. And I did nothing for this grace. Nothing for this grace. And you know what I love about what came out of the experience, this inquiry, is the value that came out of that experience. And what I love about that is that anyone with an open mind can do inquiry and have the same experience that I had. It doesn't seem as quick in time, but it is. If you take out the word time, it is. It's timeless. It's waking up to reality. It's as simple as identifying what we're thinking and believing and questioning it.
Yeah, we had someone on our Monday night call. So the past Monday night, we did an introduction welcome when I heard that you were going to be here in Boston, and I wanted to give people more of a chance to get the book and get on board with the first class. So our official first class is this coming Monday. I think it's October 11th, and we're going to read up to chapter 7, and then we'll have the following 4 Mondays. But this one woman came on, and she said the night before the class she had the worst anxiety attack of her life. And she had just bought the book, she just heard of you, she was thinking about what you were saying, of watching the thought, and questioning, is it true? And she said in the middle of the worst anxiety attack of her life, she started to laugh. And she was saying, I just realized how funny it was. Like, it was just, and she said it just disappeared. She said from there, it just was the questioning that caused her to bring her to that experience of laughter and joy.
It's a beautiful, easy way to wake up to reality. Just identify what we're thinking and believing, and just sit in, is it true? And witness what arises to meet the question.
Yeah. When this book came to me, I have to tell you this story, and I want you to share something else. So I have been practicing A Course in Miracles for 25 years maybe, and for me, I had been waiting to have a spontaneous experience like you. I'd heard about death experiences and going into the light and people encountering angels, and I spent many years waiting for that to happen to me. And when it didn't happen, I decided, okay, I need to find a practice that will take me step by step. And so for me, it was A Course in Miracles. So for most of my life, there's a happiness, there's a joy. A lot of old experiences began falling away. But in May of this year, suddenly there were people online that were, I want to say bullying maybe, or just saying things about me, and it came out of nowhere. And it was this experience of like, okay, I'm causing it, it's coming from my mind, there's no random accidents. But at the same time, I just felt like I don't know what to do. And out of nowhere in May, your publisher, Harper Collins, sent me an advanced copy of the manuscripts. And I just remember, it's right here, and I remember holding the book and just feeling like, you say, the universe is friendly. And I remember thinking that we get everything that we need in the moment to help us remember the truth. And as soon as I opened this book, and there's smileys all over this book, it says, this is the first thing, we remain alert to our stressful thoughts, the ones that cause all the anger, sadness, and frustration in the world. But we question them, and through that questioning, the thoughts lose their power over us. And from that moment, I really felt that this was a gift. I really encourage everyone to get a copy. But you tell a story in here of a similar situation. You had someone come to you who was acknowledging you as a healer, and she kept coming to your house, and then her husband showed up. And her husband said, she can't come here anymore, and if you don't stop doing what you're doing, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to burn your house, and I'd love for you to describe what you did in that situation.
Well, first, compassion. And second, I let him know that I absolutely was not a healer, that I'm simply someone who questions their thoughts, and that anyone can do it if their mind is open to it. And he said that he was, that in his job and position, that as in his words, a cop, he knew what to do with people like me. And basically, I'll say it this way, it was okay with me. And whatever he did was...
Well, you kept saying, I understand. He says, I'm going to kill you. I understand.
Yeah, I understand
and you
why
said
you'd
that
want to do that. And eventually, when he really got that I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing, that I'm just inviting people to question their thoughts, he broke down. And his wife went home with him, and I didn't see them again.
Yeah, because
it's just, love is the power. And if I believed what he believed, I'd want to kill me too. So what was he guilty of? He was believing his thoughts, and he upset him. And if I don't understand that and have compassion, then there's no self-compassion in it, because that was my problem in the world. All those years, I was simply innocent of believing my thoughts, and no one could have convinced me to believe differently. And and I invite people, if can you stop believing what you believe in the moment you believe it? It's impossible. So what was this man guilty of? So I couldn't see him as guilty. I saw him clearly as a confused, beautiful, innocent deer.
And what happens if there's situations in your life where people continue to do these things? Like if there's situations that come up for you to this day that, or I guess I should ask, do you have situations that cause you stress?
You know, this is difficult for me to say, but no, I don't. And if I did, I'd know what to do with it. You know, it's exciting just to be willing and look forward to the slightest upset, so that you can identify and question it. It's only a little fragment of an assumption or judgment or concept that hasn't been included in the whole yet. So, you know, to bring it in, we just love the mind still. We don't threaten it still, because it won't work that way. I see thoughts as the beloved. I see thoughts as children. Until I love my thoughts, I can't love the world.
Yeah. And you said in here there was a invitation to go into a group of environmentalists that wanted to save the world, and you invited them to turn their thoughts around that the planet needed saving, find the good in why the planet doesn't need saving. And so can you speak on that? So there's things that are happening in the world that are perceived as violent and...
Yeah, there was years ago, and it had to do with you know, our ecology and the planet. And I saw it as the Earth just speaking to us in plain sight. Look, open your eyes, look. You know, you're doing this to you, not me. Because the planet, you know, if we look at it as unconditional love, which if we really look, we can see that, and that it will die for us, whatever it takes, and until we understand that there's no greater gift than what it's showing us. But it's very difficult for people to hear that what they perceive as a terrible thing is really the gift. And, you know, I talk about a friendly universe, and I invite people, you know, I say it's a friendly universe, and I also say, but don't believe me, test it for yourself.
Right, yeah.
It's very important, because to say it isn't to experience it, and the experience is what I invite people to.
Yeah. I was introducing my mother to the work a couple weeks ago, and I can't remember what the situation was, but the questions are so powerful. So there's 4 questions. The first question is it true? And it's always just yes or no. So in all of your books, you give great dialogues and that you have with people, and when people start to go into the story, you're quick to say, now sweetheart, it's just yes or no. And then from without the story, with my mom, it was so amazing, because she took a moment. I said, is that true? And she took a moment, and the answer was no. And I remember you saying in your books, look, where'd that answer come from? Because the answer, it's not logic, it's not thinking. And then if the answer is yes, it's really true, yes, this person is really hurting me, you go to question 2. Is it absolutely true? Can you absolutely know it's true? And then even there, if it's a yes, what do you do when you believe that thought?
Yeah, then you just go to the 3rd question. How do you react? What happens when you believe the thought? And then that, you know, we meditate on that question, get still, and just watch what meets that question through images and emotions, and we're shown so clearly. And then who would we be in the same situation without, if we didn't believe that? And then we find opposites, and then by the end, those 2 yeses are a no. And you know, clearly, but I leave it to other people to test.
And I really just want to tell everyone, all of this is available on thework.com. And what I love about, I was just on your website recently, you don't have anyone sign up. Usually when there's free stuff on a website, you have to opt in and sign up to get a free something, and it's all there. So there's a whole list of all the emotions, of all the distress, and you have fill in the blanks. You have little cards that you can print and cut with scissors. The Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. I love what's the belief one?
The One Belief at a Time worksheet.
Find your belief for...
One belief at a time.
One belief at a time.
And it's everything on thework.com, anything there of value, anything I have of value is there free. Mm-hmm. And there's no hurdles to jump. Mm-hmm. It's just all clearly there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you say one should have the work for breakfast.
Yes, I invite the world to Inquiry for breakfast, to have the work for breakfast.
Yeah.
And to have a good day.
And have a good day.
Good
yes.
luck.
Yeah. So I'm excited for this work. I'm so grateful for you. And one of the things that I loved about the story of My Lady is, so you said that you projected her because you didn't really believe in a Jesus or Buddha at that time.
I tend to imagine that if I had a religious background, I would have projected Jesus. If I were a Buddhist, I would have projected the Buddha. Mm-hmm. But because I didn't have background like that, I projected what I needed. Mm-hmm. And so it's what I needed.
Yeah, and what you said in this...
Someone I could trust, something I could trust.
Right.
So it was that old grandmother.
And what you said was because she came back from an ancient world. She came to the ancient world. You describe it, and I love this so much, is that once there was the merging, so you merged with her, and she disappeared. You never saw her again.
At some point.
And then you said, now the reason I do the work I do is because of her showing up back in the ancient world. You said, I now show up in the ancient world. And I think that is so important because so often people have a spiritual awakening and they think, oh, I don't have to do anything now. I need do nothing. But to me, I feel there's a call that we extend this message. Like, to me, that's the generosity that's being spoken about in this book, that there's so few people that are actually showing up in that true nature.
Yeah.
And you said, I carry that back now.
Yeah. It's where we started our conversation. It's when there's no self, the only self left of me is who you would believe me to be, mm-hmm. or who anyone would believe me to be. That's all the self there can be. Mm-hmm. So there's no self to protect here. There's mm-hmm. no self literally to protect here. So it's that generous state that you just pointed to, but there's no generosity in it. Mm-hmm. It's natural. No one would think. In fact, so many of you listening to this, think of the times you've done a selfless act and expected nothing in return, and someone said thank you, and you didn't even know what they were thanking you for, mm-hmm. because it was so fluid and selfless. So we know we have the ability, and the more we question our judgments and assumptions, the more we question those thoughts that identify us, mm-hmm. Then the freer we get, mm-hmm. and the more selfless we become.
Yeah. I'd love to read this one part in here. Let's see if I can find it. The grain of sand. You remember the grain of sand?
Some of these I don't. Stephen's been interviewing me since from our first relationship, from the first time we met, and he has the kind of mind that he writes what I say down, mm-hmm. and so I need to read this book in some areas.
It's so good, and there's
once you start talking about it, it comes back clearly.
The one part here that made me laugh too was that you said she was reading the Diamond Sutra, and you asked Oh no, you emailed him from across the couch, 3 feet away, your interpretation of what you thought it was, and I just can see your relationship together. But this part here, it said, somebody asked you, I don't know if this was you, Stephen, that was bringing the questions forth. Excuse me. Why would you say bow in reverence to a grain of sand? The grain of sand gives itself entirely. Even though I may be totally unaware of it, it waits for the opportunity to show me itself. Triple dog-eared. And it exists through me. It's patient, solid in its purpose, unchanging in its present identity. It doesn't pretend. It doesn't mind if I step on it. Praise it, belittle it. It remains what it is, without disguise, without deceit. It is perfectly allowing. It doesn't resist the name I give it. Lets it be whatever I call it. I love this. Who of right mind wouldn't bow to such a consciousness? I honor it as a teacher. I love that. You honor the grain of sand as a teacher.
Truly.
And I meet its nature in everything I witness. If you throw me away, step on me, judge me as useless, overlook me, do I remain with the same constant, generous nature as the grain of sand? Thank you, Stephen, for this. Come in.
Yeah.
This is the Buddha mind. It's what I woke up to. I also learned from the grain of sand that physical bowing is unnecessary. My bowing is now an unceasing internal experience, like the emptying I underwent in the desert for so many months after I woke up. An emptying that left me with reverence toward everything I met. It left me as a student, and how do you say this? Subhuti? Subhuti.
Yeah.
In the presence of the Buddha in the presence of Subhuti.
You never know which words are going to affect people, and there's so many profound passages in the book, in my opinion. But there's a story about that. We were in France and Switzerland last summer. Katie was doing a number of events, and a 4 or 5 day silent retreat called Being with Byron Katie. And one French man stood up. The French translation, oddly enough, was published before the American edition for this book. And he said, he picked it up at a bookstore. He picked up the book, and he just turned to this particular passage and read it. And to his amazement, he became aware that his face was full of tears. He just was crying uncontrollably, and he said that one paragraph changed his life.
Yeah,
and
I get chills right now.
That's how it is. I mean, you never know which one will speak to people deeply, but I think it's the quality of his listening that brought him that wonderful experience. And if people read this book, as Katie says, with an open mind and can really listen to where it's coming from, then lives are changed.
Yeah, it is. And don't go anywhere.
Okay.
I want you to stay here from now on.
He's so articulate.
This paragraph, I have read it to maybe at least 10 people, maybe more. I carry this book in my purse, and I just keep reading it. I keep saying, you've got to listen to this. Like, who of right mind wouldn't bow to such a consciousness? Like, for us to reach that state where somebody can belittle me, call me a name, step on me, push me aside, whatever, that this grain of sand is just there.
And when I would experience this, in the desert, and become aware of this, it was, I would find myself just sobbing and just getting as close to the sand as I can, and in my mouth and in my skin, and eating it, and there's nothing you can do with a love like that. There's nothing you can do with a consciousness like that. You can't eat it, you can't touch it. Even the physical bowing it's beyond, above all of that. And it is to be felt, to experience, and then the apparent identity burns. It just burns up. It burns up because nothing can be in that kind of, just simply even a grain of sand without being diminished in its presence. Not just diminished, but just humble.
Yeah, can you imagine if you take that passage in deeply, what your experience of a beach would be, or of a sidewalk? I mean, it's radical.
My hope for this is that people will make a commitment to do what you did, of that desert experience, of questioning every single thought. And can you just describe what that was? Because, like I said, the thing that interests me the most is that you had a full-blown awakening. You had the joy that was there, ever present, but then for 3 years...
Holding it. Holding it. You know, it's so powerful, this identification, that it can, it's a trance. It's like a hypnotic trance. And when you question the thoughts that bring into that, that bring in that apparent existence, that hypnotic trance, then through inquiry, you wake up. You wake up from the trance. And it's not a quick fix. It is in the long run. It's not a quick fix, though, because what I call the underworld, you know, like, you question what you believe, and you're so free, but then what's left, those unquestioned thoughts that are left, override that enlightenment until finally, if you stay with it, it does this. It just, everything you believe is true has been met with an understanding through inquiry, and the consciousness shifts, and then it gets really what I'm saying is the entire world shifts on its axis. It goes from the old paradigm to the new.
Yes.
People often ask about experiences of opening. They say things like this: I had a mystical experience 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or I had an enlightenment experience, and then it faded. I lost it, and I still become afraid, or I still get upset when there's a parking ticket on my windshield, etc., etc. Enlightenment experiences are not that rare, especially for people who have been doing intensive meditation practice. The difference with Katie's experience was that she was given a way to stabilize it always, every moment, every day, in the 4 questions and turnarounds of the work. So that in that year after her experience, or 2 or 3 years, however long it was, whenever a thought arose that would pull her off balance, and she says that the major thought was, my mother doesn't love me. Whenever any thought arose that she was aware, pulling her off balance, in other words, pulling her away from that state of profound peace and joy, she had a way to question it and get back to the center immediately. And that's the difference. So it never faded. And this is the gift that has been made available to everybody, a way of living in the center of the universe, always.
Immediately. Yeah. And you said to your children, it be mediocre. You said just it should be ordinary, and that's really what I love about this demonstration. So I'm very grateful to the both of you.
Well, I'm certainly
for the work
grateful
you're doing.
to you for moving peace in the world, and for so many people, and
So I really am inviting all of you to buy a copy of this book. If you would like to join in the book study, you can go to lisanatoli.com/book study. It's totally free. There's an amazing big group. It's 900 people right now who are reading your book, and that just makes me so happy. And you said you're going to pop in.
Yeah, I'm going to, I'd love to pop in.
Yeah.
So we'll work out how that can be. Yeah.
And I've just read a few of the stories in here. Every single one, just look at dog-eared all over. But it's just, there's so many things in here that are just a reminder of the truth. It's like it is a book about generosity.
You covered up the mic.
Loving what is. I covered up the mic.
But
So I thank you so much for all that you've
thank you.
given.
Thank you for your
Stephen.
good
You're
work.
welcome.
Thank you, guys.